Like they crucify him for every single thing he says. And I wonder if it was just like, listen, yeah, fentanyl kills all these people. Yeah, we're going after him here. What about also Maduro's kind of a problem? Because I think a lot of us are thinking that. And then everyone's kind of wondering that behind the scenes of like, well, is this regime change? What are we doing here? That's why we're blowing up these boats. And Maduro is kind of a problem. What if it was just kind of out there in the open? We're applying pressure. This guy's a psycho. The regime is deadly. Hopefully,
Well, he's a narco terrorist, and we're shooting his source of income out of the water in the Caribbean rather than killing Americans. Like, I don't know. That actually feels a lot better to me than like lying to the American public about weapons of mass destruction and embroiling us in a 25-year conflict in the Middle East for $7 trillion. Like, I don't know. Seems like an effective way to do that. And so, yeah, it does. Listen, Trump derangement syndrome is real. There's nothing that he can do that's right. But these are things that make sense. One plane shooting a boat out of the water doesn't cost America $1 trillion. It's very effective. If we could save a couple 100,000 lives a year, that's a lot. That's probably pretty good. And we actually have to focus on our own hemisphere and not allow these things to happen. So you take away the source of income from a dictatorial leader that's basically been working essentially as a narco terrorist without invading a country. Like you can actually do some of these things. That's the problem I've seen with everything, Jillian. I saw this a lot. I talk about it a little bit. When they killed Charlie Kirk, and it became like Israel or Palestine, and it was like, well, Charlie was the. I'm like, I spoke to Charlie every day for 10 years. Like, you can be pro-Israel, but not entirely for the actions of the government that rules it right now. Like, it's not binary, and it felt like online it was like. It was this or that, and there's no nuance. There was no middle ground. And you realize that basically everyone, all of the pundits on Twitter were probably on someone's payroll. You were either on that payroll or you were on that payroll. But because you were on the payroll, you had to go with one of the binaries. And it's not how life works. Like there is a middle ground. There is nuance. There are things that my father does that he's like, hey, man, I know that my people may not love this, but it's actually the right thing to do for the long term. And here's the 15 reasons why. And you could see he's able to be effective because he's not just a career bureaucrat. He's actually run businesses. He knows you don't get everything that he knows you can take incremental wins and use that as a leverage point to get to the next thing, but none of it happens overnight. Your point, I remember it was literally like 12:03 on the day they swore him in. It was like, egg prices haven't come down yet. And then 2 weeks later, they were down like 40% or whatever the number was. But it was like, so he literally hasn't even left the podium yet. He's giving a speech like, you're mad that egg prices aren't down. Like, you can't, unscrew something that's been screwed up for 4 years in 1 second and have it kick in. You look at the inward investment that he's creating. They're like, he's spending too much time abroad. It's like, well, I don't know, but he's got like $8 trillion of committed investment into America. Now that's going to pan out over a decade. That's really good for America and jobs and all of this. You take that out and you straight line it, it's like, $1 trillion a year into our GDP. That's like a point of GDP a year. If you can go from, 3 to 4 points, 4 to 5, 2 to 3, you know how big that is? But it takes a while for this stuff to set in, and everyone wants like instant gratification because we live in an instant gratification world. I can go on Twitter and I can do this in 2 seconds, but like that's not how it actually works in the real world. It takes a while for these things to manifest. It takes a long time to undo those policies. Well, we talked about the immigration thing. How is it that by January 21st you didn't deport 20 million people? It's like, well, they very deliberately sent them to all over America. They gave them IDs. They did, you can't just find 20, we don't have enough law enforcement in America if we tripled it to find that. Now, you have negative net migration for the first time in modern history where they're actually leaving. You're cutting people off of programs, so they're deporting themselves because for years they were like, well, come to America. We're going to give you free education, free healthcare, free phones. Here's 10 grand a month to come to start. We put out the greatest calling card in the world for people who probably weren't productive in their own countries. They're not going to be here. They're not going to assimilate. They're not likely to add value, but they will be reliable Democrat voters because they will be dependent on big government to continue to support them. And so you can't undo that overnight. I wish you could. I wish you could. But we also have to play in the real world, not in some sort of, fake reality. This isn't Oz.
All right, guys, if you like this clip and you want to watch the full episode, click here. And if you want more content like this, you can subscribe to the show by clicking here.